I have to say it's wonderful to be here. I have a lot of friends in the audience, and I'm really grateful that you're deciding to spend your weekend organizing and getting ready for the battle that's ahead of us. I really want to thank Chad, not only for his introduction, but for his incredible leadership. Chad's been fighting for what he believes in since he was literally a teenager, which he still barely is, just beyond a teenager. But he should inspire all of us, because this road is going to be very long and it's very hard, but none of us can stop fighting. His leadership on the LGBTQ issues and his relentless fight for full equality for every man and woman, regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity, has helped to profoundly change our country and the lives of so many. So thank you, Chad, for all you've done for all of us. In these very intense and dangerous times, we are all personally called to fight against the awful and hateful things that President Trump and Vice President Pence are doing and trying to do every day in this country. Sometimes it feels like every day we're bracing ourselves for a brand new assault from the White House on this or any basic right or decency that he has leveled against Americans who are being marginalized. The president has undermined our sense of security, our sense of what's right, the very institutions that keep our democracy stable. So whether he's trying to undermine freedom of religion with his Muslim ban, or whether he's using religious freedom as a sword to discriminate against others, whether he's attacking the freedom of the press and trying to undermine the independence of our judiciary, whether he's attacking immigrants by targeting and villainizing our incredible dreamers. But what I want to talk about today is the way he's targeting you. You, your loved ones, your families, the people you know, the people you care about. We haven't made it through an entire year, but we have already seen too many cases of overt discrimination against the LGBTQ community from a wide range of federal departments and agencies. This includes the Department of Justice, led by Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who's gone on record defending a business's right to refuse to serve LGBTQ customers. The Justice Department this past spring also filed a brief arguing that one of our most important federal civil rights does not protect LGBTQ workers from workplace discrimination. It includes the Department of Health and Human Services, whose Assistant Secretary for Civil Rights has made bigoted statements against the LGBTQ community. It includes the Defense Department, which has marching orders to implement President's harmful, immoral, and discriminatory ban on transgender Americans from serving in the military. The Trump administration has also nominated Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court, who came in with a record of opposing LGBTQ rights and dissented this past spring in a decision to list 2 same-sex spouses on a birth certificate in Arkansas. This nomination should have been rejected by the Senate. Vice President Pence, before he was picked by President Trump, had one of the most notoriously anti-gay records as a congressman and a governor of Indiana, and he seems very proud of it. But most of all, the attitude of this administration about gay Americans is summed up in an exchange that was recently reported to The New Yorker, where President Trump joked in a meeting about Vice President Pence wanting to, quote, hang them all, in reference to us. This is outrageous. It is hateful speech that we should never tolerate from anyone, let alone the President and the Vice President of the United States. Too much violence has already been waged against LGBTQ community members to make such an offhand comment like this from a position of such extraordinary power. Too much violence has already been waged against the LGBTQ community here across the United States and across the world, from the terrifying crackdown we recently saw in Chechnya to the hate crime murder last spring of a gay man in Idaho. I would venture to guess that every single person in this room knows someone who has been targeted, bullied, discriminated against, denied a job, denied respect, mocked, even physically hurt because of their gender identity and sexual orientation. And maybe you yourselves have experienced it yourself. I certainly know many people who have. And as hard as we work and struggle to fight back against this hate, against this violence, there is still a constant barrage of attacks against the LGBTQ community, no longer just from fringe groups, but from inside the White House itself. But I know that you will not stop fighting against this, and neither will I. That is our role, and this is our role today, in this moment of time, for this country, for this democracy. None of us can give up. We have to persevere. And so for each one of us, it is a personal call to action. Right now, the next chapter of the LGBTQ movement is being written. We are responsible to write it. We are the authors of that chapter. It's a moment when every single voice in this room is important, by what you say, by what you do, by what levers of power you have access to. Every single time, every single one of us must fight for the empowerment of others. Fight for those who are most at risk, those who cannot speak for themselves, those who are too afraid or too marginalized, those who are not being listened to. We are all brothers and sisters in this struggle for equality and justice, inclusive of race, religion, cultural identity, individual passions. Injustice against one of us is an injustice against all of us. Our work is really not fully finished as long as anyone is left behind, because the promise of truth and justice is what binds us. We are so much stronger together, which is how we are going to win the next battle. That is who we are, and that's why we will prevail. That's how we won the fight against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was one of my first fights as a US Senator, one of my proudest moments ever in public service. Now we have to protect transgender Americans who want to serve in our military and are already serving. With HRC's strong support, Senator Collins and I introduced a bill to actually protect our trans troops, and we were lucky enough to bring John McCain along, which is amazing. Just know. So I know that none of you are going to back down, and I know that HRC isn't going to back down to make sure we can actually stop this ban on our troops. We've had some other victories along the way. We finally saw the Stonewall Inn designated as a national monument. And now when the National Park Service tells the story of the American people, our culture, our history, our diversity, that story will be included to show the voice of the LGBT community. We also saw the Supreme Court affirm the same-sex marriage as a right protected by the US Constitution. And I'll never forget that moment, that overwhelmingly sense of relief and joy standing outside the Supreme Court that day when the ruling came out. Now, I am in awe of the advocates and activists who raised their voices for so long, for so many years, to help these historic moments come true. And I have enormous faith that we can accomplish so much more because of each of you that are in this room today. The only time our democracy has ever worked is when regular people like you stand up and demand it. So we have to continue to expand civil rights and improve human rights. The only way we will be able to push back against the hate and intolerance and violence and bigotry in this country today. It's when all of us, and every American in the LGBTQ community, raises our voice together and demands something better. That's how we repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell. That's how we added the story of gay rights to the national park system, and it's how we made sure same-sex marriage would be the law of the land. Keep using that power to persuade people. Keep using your personal story as the one that drives change. That courage, that insistence, that unwillingness to stop and unwillingness to be silent is our fundamental power. We also have the power to vote. The one place where every person in America has that same right, that same voice, that same power is when you're in the voting booth. And I know HRC is so committed to 18 and so committed to 20. God bless you all, and thank you for all you're doing.